I'm Zoe.
Oh, are you? Are you certain of that? I am definitely Ben.
And this is a very uncertain Penny in the Landline.
Yeah, ambivalent Penny in that landline.
Very suspicious Penny in the Landline. Episode 4.
Ooh,
We're really
episode
doing it.
4.
Everyone who was saying that we wouldn't be able to do it, which
All
is
of
no
our
one.
haters, everyone who denied us. We are
Yes.
getting tens of plays every week.
I mean, pretty good. We're
Yeah.
doing it. We're keeping consistent. We've got our upload schedule for listening, and we're having super much fun. Super much fun.
A lot of fun.
And
A lot of fun.
and as usual, Ben is calling from his bed once more. Are we surprised?
I it's so weird because Flex, I went to Paris and
Yes, you did.
I feel like I didn't go because I'm literally, my room and my bed are the exact same as when I left, and I am literally in the exact same position I was in last time I was like doing this call, and I'm like, well, maybe I didn't go to Paris, maybe I dreamt it, because this feels like nothing is different. But yeah, I'm in bed, I'm in my dressing gown in bed, and it's intimate. It's the thing with Penny that I'm on. It's an intimate experience for the listener.
Oh yes. I'm sitting at the edge of mine. I'm sitting usually where I tend to eat my meals, at the very edge of my bed, because that's just how we are living. We're living like a rat.
Bohemian.
It's rat boy life. Yeah, bohemian. This is the life. So, as per every week, Ben and I bring a secret topic to be revealed during the recording of this very episode you're listening to. So we alternate who starts, who finishes, and we bring a secret topic for us to enjoy and dissect together. Yes. So I think it's my turn this week.
It is your turn.
So excited. It's the festive
I'm excited.
Season. It's Deck the Hells. Deck the Hells. Deck the Halls.
Deck the Hells.
A little bit of a Freudian slip, actually, because I'm bringing a very festive topic. I'm talking about vampires. We're talking about vampires. We're talking about vampires. So
okay, wait. What if vampire? Oh my god, we keep doing this. What is the segue from Christmas to vampires? Can we please?
That's why I say Deck the Hells, because we're just talking about vampires because I wanted to last week and we're doing it now.
Okay.
And I didn't actually feel like being very jolly this season. I'm still in Halloween mode. So, I'd love to talk about vampires because, I have this little book called Vampire Movies, and it's this tiny little book. It has all this information about different vampires and different films and different cinemas, and, like, the cultural conversation about these monsters is so interesting because of their, like, roots in, like, Christianity and like all these different things and how they've been portrayed in different years. So I just love to talk about them like as a concept with you. What do you think about them in general? I would like to know about that.
Okay. I think they are normally very hot, but I think it's weird how hot they are. I think they're always hot actors, but I don't think I personally don't find the idea of a vampire very hot, but I know that people do. So I think it's a lot to do with, like, you know, gothic and people just kind of like finding mean, violent people attractive. I think obviously famous vampires, Edward Cullen.
Yes.
You know, very,
classic.
very, very hot, very, very sexy. But that's because Robert Pattinson's very hot and very sexy. I actually don't think that Edward Cullen is very sexy. Like, I think
I'm so sorry. I need to stop you here because when you said famous vampires, and we didn't say Dracula, we didn't say Nosferatu, we said Edward Cullen, and I'm really glad. I'm glad that that's the where your mind went first. You know, I think it says a lot about you.
Well, I think it does. I think I could go for Dracula, I could go for Nosferatu, but no. I went for Golden Globe nominee Robert Pattinson, who is apparently, according to science, the best looking man in history.
Oh, is he? What? That's... Okay.
Well, apparently there's this whole thing about Greek beauty and like, you know, and like face measurements, and like how wide apart are your eyes, how long is your nose, how
Yes,
wide is
yeah,
your
the golden
forehead.
ratio. Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently he is like the golden ratio.
Right.
And you know what? I'd
Right.
agree. He is extremely beautiful, but
Yeah, he's very
not very
beautiful.
good at not very hot in the Batman though. I think he's kind of the emo Batman is not hot. Anyway, that's beyond the point. Vampires. I don't want my blood to be sucked. It scares me. I think it's really
Right.
awful, and it's not sexy to me. It just seems scary. That's my thoughts.
Well, but it's kind of like the whole idea of like, oh, my life is in someone else's hands, and it is kind of scary, but it is kind of hot, you know,
Oh, I mean, obviously, totally, I get that. That's not, it will hurt. It will hurt. It will hurt. I'm a little baby. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was discussing this with Val about piercings and tattoos, and Val thinks I should get like a little hoop earring, and
Right.
I don't want that for lots of reasons, but I appreciate the thought. But I mean, one of the main reasons is the pain, because I'm a little baby. So
Right.
how am I going to
Aw.
do when someone is biting my neck?
Yeah. Well, what I'm thinking
Scary.
about is also, like, because last week we talked about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I think
Yes,
about
we
the
did.
vampires in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And they're scary. When they got their prosthetics on and they got their big faces and forehead. I'm sure someone knows about this, about, like, why they look like that and whatever, like, and why it's not the two little teeth. But, oh my god, it's so scary. Like, that I get, because it's big teeth, they get all scary, spooky, and they go, I'm gonna suck your blood, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
And
No, I
that's the
completely
thing
agree
as
with
well,
you.
like again, the different kinds of vampires in cinema is so interesting because of like the different like visual language people have used for it. And I feel like there's so, like, I just find all this so interesting, and I've definitely shut it down a bit more research prior to this, but like different cultures have different ideas of different vampires. Do you have like a favorite? Do you because I actually never saw Twilight, sorry, Robert Pattinson, who's
That's
definitely
a
listening to this
very
podcast.
bold take. Everyone's seen Twilight.
I'd love to know about what you think about the vampire representation in Twilight.
Oh my god, I could watch Twilight forever. So in my second year uni house, I had a Twilight eclipse poster on the wall. So I
Yeah, I
think
did know.
I love it. I think there's an element of things like Twilight, for example. Vampires are very campy, like extremely
Yes.
campy. Whereas
Yes.
and I think a lot of Twilight's criticisms is like its tone is just really odd. Like it's trying to be sultry, and vampires can be sexy, but they also have to have an element of camp to them. I don't think
Yeah.
that Twilight is willing to indulge in its campiness as much as it should. I mean, New Moon obviously does a little bit. It's also fun to look back on things like Twilight because it takes itself so seriously. And I think like that, and in and of itself, it's just ridiculous. Like it is just so silly. Like these like family of
Yes.
vampires who have all come from different time periods, and he's falling in love with a teenage girl, and the teenage girl is giving nothing, and like it's so odd. I mean, there's so many other vampire movies but I really struggle to think of a vampire movie that is truly good in terms of like Twilight is good because it's fun, but Twilight is by no means a well-made film. Whereas,
Right.
actually, to be fair, maybe the first one is easily the best one. But like, I think that they're by no means like cinema per se. It's just a pretentious sentiment, but they aren't. The cultural
Right.
impact is massive, but they aren't like artistic feats. But I can't really think of a vampire movie that is. Like maybe like people love to talk about Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, the one with Winona Ryder and Gary Oldman.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a really fun and very campy film. Very campy film. Like that's like almost like a theatre play put into film. The bottom line is I can't take vampires seriously. I think they're really silly.
Perfect. I think they're silly too, and because I love vampires. I think they're so funny and silly.
And I also think the reason people find them attractive a lot of the time isn't just like the pain and all that jazz. I think it's because they are so effeminate as well. Like they are so, and that's one of the reasons that Twilight's a bit weird. Is because Robert Pattinson's trying to be like Mask King, whilst also being like like your whole entity is sparkling. Like, it's like pick a lane. But I think it's like, even Interview with the Vampire, the original movie, and like Dracula is extremely feminine character. Like, you know, he's got the long hair, he wears the gowns, he's very like, it's all very hyper feminine, and people love that. It's very subversive.
But this is the thing, is where it comes from, is these ideas of the super feminine predatory man has all these, you know, like all these roots from, you know, people being scared of gay men, and that being the fear of
really?
like, okay, well, yeah, like think about it, like imagine, you know, you're back in the day, you're writing a book, you're like, okay, I'm gonna make a scary monster who lures people, who, you know, like uses their looks, blah blah blah. Why not, you know, like super feminine, super like sensual, like everything, and you know, it's always a big masked guy who comes and fucking kills him, you know, it's never, and that's what happens. And like I really need to read this book again, because it talks about like sexuality, and you know, there was that movie about it was Dracula's Daughter or something. There's loads of like lesbian stuff in there as well, about like, again, like desire, and then all these stories about like in the 80s and stuff, about the movies and TV series that are coming out there, about the exchange of blood, and like the talk about HIV and AIDS, and that was kind of the like commentary going on. So there's a lot of queerness intertwined with vampires, like with the discussion about vampires, which I found you really interesting. Which again, oh no, he's gone missing. Ben, where did he go? Sorry folks. We had a little bit of a technical issue, but that's okay. We'll jump right back in.
I don't know what happened there. I'm so
anyways,
sorry.
That's okay. It was bound to happen at some point. So yes, I was just saying about how there's loads of ideas tied to vampirism and queerness and what people are afraid of, and you know what sort of monsters get conceived during which time periods, and what the consensus of like people's fears are and stuff like that.
There's so much fascinating material there with vampires, and I wish I knew more about them, but I do know is they're remaking Nosferatu.
Are they? Really?
Yeah, and it's got that creepy guy who played the clown in It. He's playing Nosferatu.
Oh, is he? Damn.
The Skarsgård brother, one of the Skarsgård boys.
Yes. To be honest, I don't know that much about Nosferatu, like, and how different he is from Dracula, to be honest, because they're two different creatures. And again, it's kind of one of those things where it's yet another type of vampire where he's just like a little freak, when Dracula is like this gorgeous, sensual, mysterious looking man. So
the impression I get from a lot of the praise for the original Nosferatu is its technical skill.
Yes,
I think is the impression I have. I know it's got Lily Rose Depp in the new Nosferatu.
Right. Okay.
And she is so beautiful.
Yes.
So it's not coming out till next Christmas, and it's directed by the guy who made The Northman, Robert Eggers. He made the Lighthouse. He's very, very, very good.
And speaking of other vampires, there's also What We Do in the Shadows, which is its own thing as well. Have you seen that movie?
I have seen the movie. I haven't seen the series, but I've seen the movie.
I do love a bit of What We Do in the Shadows. I think again, it's one of those things where they know how silly and
I have seen the series. I have seen it. I have with Tom.
You have seen it. Yes. Because I've watched it, and the thing I love the show, because I really appreciate about them, is they use so many practical effects, especially in the last season. I think it was season 5. Every single episode had fantastic practical effects and puppets, and this is the type of thing, because like it's going back to the basics, right? Like old vampire movies had all these like spooky, scary practical effects, and they're so camp, and you can tell they're silly, but they just look so much better than, you know, like. And CGI can be used like to reinforce them. I'm not saying CGI isn't bad. CGI artists are very talented, but the practical effects are just so goofy, silly, and so I just love seeing it. I just love seeing it in TVs and movies. I think they're just great. I think there should be more.
I know. I completely agree with you. There's a reason why things like Jurassic Park and The Exorcist are still so impressive. It's because like even though they don't necessarily look real per se. Like it's still like your brain logically, you can see the strings or whatever that kind of create this effect. Yeah. Your brain I think it's genuinely scarier because your brain feels more affected by reality.
On like a technical level as well, like when you're filming, like for the actors, it's so much easier to act when there's like a practical effect to react to, rather than being like, oh, there's a ball hanging in the air, it's a monster. But like in the What We Do in the Shadows, you have this massive, like, creepy little guy who's being like puppeteered around, or I think it's someone in the suit. I don't remember, but like it's just like if you've got the budget to do it, and like even if you don't, like, loads of people get away with doing it with no budget as well, and that's when it gets really fun as well, is when people find really creative ways to do practical effects. Anyways, that's a whole different topic, but I think it just goes to show that with What We Do in the Shadows, it just goes back to that kind of camp thing that vampires should be about.
Twilight used no practical effects. Twilight
No, they didn't.
Twilight was all CGI, all high budget, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Those wolves were not real wolves.
No, they're not real. And I wanted to, before we end this, I wanted to ask you, my question for you, my vampire-centric question, is what would you do if you got turned into a vampire? In real life, in this day and age, what would you do? What would happen?
Oh. Well, what can vampires fly? They can, can't they?
You could turn into a bat.
Okay. I would... Okay, and this is a testament to who I am as a person. For all the amazing things I could do as a vampire, my immediate thought is I turn into a little bat, and I would fly somewhere to people who hate, to the houses of those who hate me, and I would just be a real pain. I would poop my bat poop everywhere. I would also just listen in and get tea. Do you know what I mean? I'd spy on people. I'd spy on people. I'd see what all my enemies are up to, just so I can get the tea. And I'd use it for narcissistic and petty things. What would you use your bat skills for?
I think this is the thing, because, you know, obviously one of the big things about being vampires, if you don't think about Twilight, is that they can't be in the sun, right? And there's lots of scenes in Buffy where it's very silly when Spike has to put a little jacket on and gets, you know, burnt in the sun and stuff. And I think about it, I'm like, I spend so much time active at night anyway, and in dark rooms. Like, I'm in a theater. Like, surely that's a perfect place for a vampire to be. I could just go to sleep in the theater. No one would have to know. I'm in a black box all the time. No one would find out. So I think I would first of all be like, okay, this is kind of hot. And then I would kind of realize a bit later on about the repercussions of this, and like have a whole panic and like existential moment. Because I can get very maudlin and nostalgic, and I'll be like, I'll never be able to see the way that sun dapples the leaves through the summer air, whatever. But then eventually, I think, I just fly around as a little bat. I'll figure it out.
To be deep, but if I was a vampire, I'd be very stressed. I'd have to like, you know, kill people, and that's very stressful.
Yeah. Well, you could, you know, there's lots of vampires who are like vegetarian, like, you know, vegetarian as in they like eat animals instead, like they do like animal blood. But you know, it is a bit of a moral quandary. But I think for the silly, goofy stuff, I think I'd have a lot of fun. I think it'd be, I wouldn't want to be a vampire. Bottom line, not ideal, right?
No.
Not the best thing to happen. So,
not good.
but I do like them. I do like them a lot. If you came to me, this is the thing. If you came to me one day and you're like, so I've been turned into a vampire, I don't know what to do. I'd be like, I got you. And, you can have some of my blood. I'd make sure you're okay. I'd want you to be safe.
Aww.
I want you to, you know, I wouldn't, if someone came out to be as a vampire, I'd accept them. I'd make sure that they got what they needed, close their little blinds, put newspaper up on their walls so the sunlight doesn't streak through and kill them while they sleep, and make sure your little cushions in your coffin are all comfy.
Aren't you kind? Thank you.
Aww.
Well, that's a good segue into my topic, because that's very polite of you to look after me. Also, very polite. Vampires are very polite. I mean, typically, you know, traditional vampires are very like, oh, hello, welcome to Transylvania. So today I will be talking about manners and being polite. And I just spent some time in Paris, and I think there's a general notion that Parisians are apparently quite rude, but I found that not to be true. I found them to be very welcoming and very, very kind and polite and very happy to be there, because I'm very cultured. I think manners are a really fascinating thing. I think I have a very complex relationship with manners. As a kid growing up, I was always told that I was very, very, very polite as a kid, and people always loved having me as a guest. And I still, you know, I do in a formal setting. I am very polite, and I'm very I'm very good at that kind of stuff. But then I've also been known to be notoriously demanding and forthcoming, as some people have said,
Right.
and that is fairly rude. So, what is your attitude towards manners? Do you think they are essential? As someone who's not English as well, because being British, your manners are very important. So, please tell me, what do you think about manners?
Well, this is the thing, and when you were saying before, I think what it is that every culture has different sets of manners and different ways to express politeness, which might come off rude to other people, because like here in Britain, like there's very like the politeness and manners is very tied to like the culture here. The way you guys express it is in a very specific way, where in the States, it's, you know, the politeness will be expressed in quite a different way, as is, you know, in different countries and stuff. For example, like if you're maybe making noise as you eat, like if you're like smacking your lips or like, you know, slurping whatever food down, in some places that's seen as really rude, but in some other places that's seen as you're appreciating the food. So it's actually polite to be making, you know, noise and stuff. So that's kind of like, I find it so interesting, you know, like growing up as a teenager, like with all the kind of like, you know, what's it called? Like, it's like a weeaboo, but like for the UK. It's like all the people who like love the UK.
An Anglophile.
Yes, like that kind of vibe of like me being 14 and being in love with like Tom Hiddleston, being like, I want to go to the UK because everyone is so polite there. Like, oh, whatever. But like, it is kind of like people, you know, people offer cups of tea. Like, that's what people do when you come to the house. What I've noticed is sometimes the politeness and manners can come to a detriment to its people, especially in Britain, because people are very afraid to not be polite and to be seen as rude. Some people. So I love to talk about that because I, as an American, sometimes I find it very funny.
Right. So in formal settings, in people I don't know, I try and be very polite, mainly because that's what I've been trained to do. With my friends, I've been told that I can be extremely rude.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm too comfortable. I think that's part of it as well. I think comfortability and manners go hand in hand. When I'm in England, I don't see myself as being particularly polite, whereas there are people I know who I would say are considerably more polite than I am. But when I'm abroad, I'm extra polite. I think maybe it's because I'm subconsciously, well, for one, I'm trying to be respectful of their environment, but also trying to represent Britain in a good light. But I feel like maybe you are, because you're like, oh, I'm a bumbling Brit abroad.
Yeah.
And there's this general idea, British people, English people, same as Americans often as well, are very like, you know, American-centric, England-centric, because the whole way the world is presented is that, oh, it's through a Western lens. So when I'm in this environment, I'm like, oh, I need to be extra polite, extra respectful to show that I don't think that way. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I mean, manners, I think you're right, can be extremely detrimental in terms of like your own decision making. I think people often, you know, it's different for men and women and all sorts of things like that as well. But like, you can really hurt yourself and your own well-being by being afraid to say no, which is such a simple thing. But in England, especially, like saying no to something is often just really baffling. People can't believe it. They're like, oh. I think there's an element of things in England where if you ask your employer to do anything or ask anyone to do anything or say no to things, they're like, oh my God, they're so rude, they're so disobedient, they're so difficult. It's like, oh my God, like maybe I can just not want to do things. Like that is such a crazy concept in itself. Like,
yes.
I agree, manners can be a double-edged sword. I think it can be lovely, but it can also be very detrimental.
Yes. It's so interesting. And I think politeness and manners is very much reflected in customer service, which is very interesting because that, like, if you want to know about, you know, what a culture expects from you in terms of like how you treat others, how you talk to others, it's always a good way to see by going and trying to be customer service, because here, like, it's very, you know, people are nice, but they're, you know, direct to the point. This is happening. If you go to America, lots of different places, it's a conversation. How was your day? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what's expected there. And then meanwhile, in places like Switzerland, where I'm from, that is non-existent. Like, there's no
Rude.
buy
Rude.
your things, and not everywhere. I know plenty of places that people, very nice people, some, you know, local places, but generally, and that's the thing, it's just not expected. And it's kind of annoying.
I have an anecdote for you. I have an anecdote
Yes.
for you. I mean, you will recall
Yep.
this story when I was in Geneva, when I went to buy my nephew a toy whale from a very,
Yep.
very fancy toy store. A very expensive, because everything in Geneva is expensive. It was
Yes,
like
yes.
25 francs or something. Went to the till, and she was like, "Do you need a bag?" And I was like, "Oh, no, thank you." And she proceeded, without telling me, to gift wrap the whale, and therefore it grew in size because the amount of paper was on top of it, and it was no longer going to fit in my bag. It was no longer going to fit. So I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. Actually, I would really like a bag." And she went, "Well, I already asked you for a bag." And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh! I was gooped. I was like, oh. And if that happened in England, you would be ruined,
Shanked.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting. It's interesting how different levels of manners, because I find American manners very appealing, but also it's tip based, isn't it? Because they want,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
for them that their income truly relies on it. Whereas,
Depends
you know,
on it. Yes.
in England, being polite isn't about income. It's just about cultural standing.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm like, would I rather have someone be rude to me, but be
Yeah.
like a real person? I don't know.
When I go back home, it's kind of interesting because, like, yes, okay, sometimes it's a bit rude. Like, I've had this really silly interaction once where I went to ask what was in a salad, and because I was just making sure there was no meat in it for my little friend Will, because he's allergic to meat. And I was like, I'm just trying to double check, because a lot of these little, you know, like these little restaurants near the lake, sometimes they put random shit in the salads when you don't ask them to, whatever. So I asked her, and she was like, tomate, bouffala, carrot. Is there meat in there? And I was like, oh my god, like, relax. And it's kind of funny because, like, yes, that's, like, not pleasant. But a part of me goes, okay, like, it's kind of, this person isn't forced to put on a mask at work, and why would I expect them to? Like, they're providing me, you know, they're giving me food, and that's it. Why should we expect someone to have to add all this on? And again, it's just kind of an interesting social commentary of, like, you know, why has politeness been created? You know, it's because, you know, that's how we interact. That's how we go about our day without, you know, punching each other and stuff like that. So it's just so interesting. I get so interested about manners and politeness.
Well, it's a method. It's like a lot of these things. It's a method of control in both,
Yes.
but from a larger standpoint and a minimal standpoint, because often manners are a very safe space. Like when someone's
Yes.
extremely rude to you, if you're extremely polite to them, it can completely, you know, it can either escalate the situation sometimes, but it can often
Yes.
completely diminish someone's anger. Whereas in, you know,
Yes.
if you were to fight back, it doesn't actually tend to get you very far. So I think manners are very useful. They're very safe, protective shield. I think especially for women, I could imagine. Well, I can imagine. I don't have to imagine.
Oh.
I know a lot of women. I've had this where like being like polite is actually what very keeps them safe, because there's nothing that
Yeah.
men hate more than a vocal woman. And I think like that is it's nuts. I think, but then there is one element of it where it's like, oh, I love to go somewhere and just be very polite and sweet, and it makes you feel good and it makes them feel good.
Yeah.
But it is a performance. It's like everything in life is a
It is.
performance.
It is.
It's just
And
depending how you want to play along.
Yes, and it's one of those things as well, like when you really think about it, like let's say you're, you know, working somewhere and then a customer is like yelling at you, disrespecting you, and you're expected to be polite, to be like, you can go call the helpline, blah, blah, blah. And if you think about that, it's kind of hilarious that we're not allowed to just go, get out. You know what I mean? And like, there's a reason why politeness exists and why we've come to this point.
It's an interesting one from like a customer service perspective as well, because I've been, you know, it's easy to be in both fields, because I constantly find myself between that. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, like, they were so rude to me. I can't believe they were so rude to me as a customer.
Yeah.
But then sometimes when I'm the
Yeah.
server and I'm rude, I'm like, of course I was rude, you're an idiot. So it's like, how it's such an interesting, like, nuance where it's like, where's the line drawn? Like, is it ever appropriate to be rude? I don't know, but it can be fun.
There's a reason it exists, and a reason why different cultures have different ways of expressing it. You know, and it's like many things that it's a social construct. It literally is. It's a social construct.
Well, on that note, let's very politely tie it together because we have been here for a while.
Yes.
So, so ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries, gays, people of all areas of life, thank you for listening to us today. You fabulous person, and
thank you.
Please leave lovely feedback.
Leave us some feedback. Follow us on Spotify, and I think you can do that on Apple Podcasts as well. Leave a like.
You can indeed.
Feedback and follow. It really helps with us to know if we're going in the right direction.
It really does.
The algorithm. And we really appreciate you guys tuning in. So
100%.
We shall see you this time next week, baby.
Well, yeah, and have a very lovely Christmas to those who celebrate.
And have a very lovely Christmas to those who celebrate, and a happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, y'all. Sorry.
Yeehaw. Okay. Bye. Yeehaw.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.